Okay, during the Industrial Revolution, the country was changing, not just technology-wise, but they were also changing as far as the society goes. They were trying to reform society and make it a better place. The thing that kind of sparked this reform movement, which is what we're going to talk about today, was the Second Great Awakening. It was a renewal of religious faith in the 1790s and early 1800s. So during this time period, there were revivals all over the country, and people started going back to church, and they started to put a lot of their faith started being restored. We'd had the First Great Awakening during the colonial time period, so this is going to be the second religious movement. It's also going to spark the reform movement, which is to make a change or improvement. So we're going to talk about the reform movements of the 1800s. Okay, the first reform movement we're going to talk about is the temperance movement. It was a movement to stop the drinking and sale of alcohol. The leaders of this movement are going to be the churches and the women. And they came up with 3 reasons why we needed to stop the use and sale of alcohol. They say, number 1, alcohol consumption is causing the destruction of family. The men are getting off work and they're wanting to blow off steam, so they're going to saloons, and they're spending a lot of time in the saloons and not enough time at home, were the complaints of the women. Number 2, it's leading to crime. Okay, alcohol, they said, they gave credit to alcohol as the reason for lots of public outbursts and arguments and other criminal activities. They said because a person is under the influence of alcohol, it is causing them to make poor choices. So they said our crime rate is going up because the use of alcohol is going up. So if we lower the use of alcohol, we'll lower our crime rate. Third was poverty. Obviously, if you're spending all of your money to purchase alcohol, it is putting your family into a situation where they don't have money to purchase things such as food and pay any type of bills you may owe. Number 2, the labor reform. This is a movement to improve working conditions and hours, and it was led by the Lowell Mill Girls. We've talked about the Lowell Mill Girls. They worked in the Lowell Mills in Massachusetts. They were textile workers. And so prior to the labor reform movement, the hours were incredibly long and the working conditions were awful. They were loud. They were extremely dangerous. And so this is the first time we're going to see a group of people join a union, a labor union, and they're going to strike. The women are going to walk out of the factory and strike. Now, what's the purpose of a strike? Well, the idea behind a strike is if we all stop working and the factory has no workers, they can produce no products. And if they produce no products, they're going to lose profit for the day. And they're only going to be able to go so many days before they need the workers back. And so they'll be more willing to negotiate the terms the terms that the workers have to return to work. And so they did the first strike in America. The labor reform movement then is, at this point, we have another labor reform in the 1900s, but at this point the labor reform movement is just simply trying to reduce the work hours to around 10 or 14 hours a day, and to improve working conditions and reduce the noise and the danger with working in a factory. Okay, the third labor reform movement we're going to talk about, not labor reform movement, the third reform movement we're going to talk about is education reform. And this was a movement to improve public education. We did have public education, but it was very limited. And so a man by the name of Horace Mann, who's going to be known as the father of education, said that he believed education was a great equalizer among men. No matter how the background he came from, rich or poor, education would be a equalizer, would cause all of us to come in on equal ground and hopefully leave on equal ground. And so he spent a lot of time creating public schools and working to create public universities as well. The fourth reform movement is care for the needy. And this was the movement to improve treatment of the mentally ill and handicapped, and it was led by Dorothea Dix. Dorothea Dix went into a prison one day and found that not only were there children in prison with murderers and just these very violent criminals, there were also people that were mentally ill being housed in these prisons as well. And so she said, this is not right. They have not committed a crime. And so she went about doing 3 things to help improve the care for those that needed it. Number 1, she created state hospitals. This would be a place where people that were mentally ill and handicapped could go to receive treatment if a family could not provide treatment for them. Number 2, she created schools to help with disabilities and handicapped children. So, for example, she helped create schools for the deaf. And this was a way to, again, create an equal opportunity for those who would struggle in a normal school setting. Number 3, she removed the mentally ill from prison. She said this is not a place for them, and she removed that ability for you to put a mentally ill person in prison simply because of their disability or handicap. This is going to lead to the 5th reform movement, which is the prison reform. And this was a movement to improve the prison system, again led by Dorothea Dix. And she's going to make 2 improvements within the prison system. So once she cleaned out the prison system and made it a place where people that had truly committed a crime were being housed, then she decided to create juvenile facilities, and she moved the children out of the facilities where there were violent offenders. She said it's not safe for the children. So number 2, she then offered rehabilitation. She said, okay, we're going to keep these criminals housed in these prisons, but what's going to happen when they're released? If we offer them no program to help rehabilitate them, they're going to probably be more likely to commit a crime again. So she said we need to work with them while they're in prison to teach them skills so that when they leave the confines of this prison, they will be able to be functioning members of society. Okay, next is the abolitionist movement, and this is the movement to end slavery. The next 2 reform movements, the abolitionist movement, and then next will be the women's movement. The leaders involved in this are going to be a lot of the same people, because many of them believed that or wanted to work towards equality for women as well as African Americans. So here are some of the leaders, not all of them. Frederick Douglass, who was a former slave. Harriet Tubman, who was also a former slave. Sojourner Truth, another former slave. William Lloyd Garrison, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, the Grimke sisters, who grew up on a plantation and saw the horrors of slavery. The Quakers, this entire religious group, was strongly opposed to slavery. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Okay. Some of the things that that these people were involved in that tried to help stop stop slavery and stop the spread of slavery was, one, the Underground Railroad, which I know we've all heard of, and one of the greatest conductors on the Underground Railroad was Harriet Tubman. Of course, it wasn't really a railroad, it wasn't really underground, but it was a system in which they could help runaway slaves escape to the north. And Harriet Tubman, went back time after time to bring people out of the South and bring them to the north where they would be free. And every single time she was risking her life. She had a huge bounty on her head if she was ever caught. She would be in very, very serious trouble. But she was willing to do that. Also, there were lots of publications that went out nationally to encourage people to turn away from slavery, and the abolitionists believed it was morally wrong, and so they would print lots of articles. And one newspaper, The Liberator, which was written by William Lloyd Garrison, or edited by William Lloyd Garrison, was a newspaper that was published nationally, but it was mostly in the North here, and it just always spoke about the cruelty of slavery and what we could do to end it. Of course, Frederick Douglass would tour the nation and the globe speaking out against slavery. This movement's going to go on for quite some time. It's going to become more dramatic and more effective as we get closer to the Civil War. Okay, and then the last reform movement we're going to talk about is the women's suffrage movement. And this means the movement to grant women the right to vote. Suffrage means voting rights. And so these leaders included Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Lucretia Mott, Susan B. Anthony, Sojourner Truth, William Lloyd Garrison, and Frederick Douglass again. A lot of the same people you saw in the abolitionist movement. Women wanted the right to vote, and they were not treated as equals, and so these two women especially, worked very hard to try and get women the right to vote. Susan B. Anthony is known for saying that all women should have their own bank account. It wasn't really a bank account back then, but their own savings, their own nest egg, their own money, and they shouldn't depend on a man for that. So one of the ways they tried to get women's equality and the right to vote was that they held a convention, and it was called the Seneca Falls Convention, and within the convention they wrote the Declaration of Sentiments. They took the Declaration of Independence where it said all men are created equal, and they added all men and women were created equal. Basically, they were declaring that they believe women should be equal to men. They believe that women should have equal say in the country and choosing representatives to represent them. So these 7 reform movements, all of them are going to be repeated again in the 1900s. But this was kind of the first time that we as a society said, you know what, there's some things that we need to change to better ourselves, to make us a better country and one that's more equal for all involved.